I'd almost forgotten everything. Then I just work, come back, work, sleep, rinse and repeat. So it's really frustrating. I didn't tell my parents. Learning to lean into the stress, it just reminded me that, God is looking after us. And hey friends, welcome back to the channel. My name's Rohan. I'm a second year medical student studying at Cambridge University. As you can tell by the title of this video, this is a bit more of a different style of video, a bit more stripped back, a bit less scripted. The motivation to talk about this topic of stress in medicine, stress at Cambridge, whatever, is a lot of videos on YouTube say how great Cambridge is, and of course I agree with them. I'm incredibly lucky to be studying at such an amazing university and meet so many wonderful people. I think it's important to be honest and to give both sides of the story, and particularly for prospective students, just to be a bit more real about what life is actually like. There's not going to be much of a structure to this. I'm just going to rant on for a bit. But at the end, I'll also talk a bit about how I overcame some of the adversities of this year. So I hope this video provides some value for you, even if it is just entertainment. So yeah, this is basically me just talking about second year of medical school, which I've just completed. And the story actually starts before second year started, and I think we have to go back to September 2020. Basically, the situation is our first year exams got postponed. Usually we'd have them at the end of May, start of June, like any other normal course, but ours was moved back to September due to the pandemic. I have no idea why, don't ask me. That was quite annoying because it meant that we couldn't really get any downtime over the summer. So even though the exams weren't that bad, I was just too scared to switch off completely and just throw away all the hard work I'd done throughout the year. I say the exams weren't too bad is because we only had 3 subjects in first year, and crucially we didn't have to write the essays. So the essays make up 50% of your mark, and they're kind of stressful because you gotta get down a lot of information in not very much time. Another issue with the first year exams is they removed all the ranking systems and stuff, so it was just pass fail. So the motivation wasn't very high, and even though I did quite well, it didn't really feel like I accomplished anything. Yeah, that's when we kind of go into second year, I guess. Second year is notoriously the hardest year of the course, just because we just have so many subjects. There are 5 main scientific subjects in total. They actually showed us this graph in first year about the relative difficulties of each year in kind of leading up to being a consultant, and yeah, you can see second year is right up there. The problem with the exams is, I'm sure many of the medics will agree with me, is they reward you too much for how well you know each and every little sentence of the handouts. The handouts are just the lecture notes they give you. And they don't give you that much credit for actually understanding the material and understanding the principles behind it. Even essays, which are designed to help you go a bit deeper and explore deeper concepts, they still expect you to get most of the really artificial points which they just put in the lecture notes. So in a sense, it's really about memorization and just brute force shoving loads of information down your throat, because the way they ask the questions, like MCQs and even the short answers, that's the main way to differentiate candidates, because most people know most of the important stuff, but it's these rare things so this cerebellum is dysdiadochokinesis, all these random words they just expect you to know. And what's worse, this is one of the reasons why I'm not 100% satisfied with the teaching at Cambridge or the way the departments work, is for some reason some of the departments don't publish all their recent past papers, and none of them release their answers. So it's really frustrating. Some of them, you'll be doing past papers from 2009 when the subject name itself was different. So you really don't know, you're just stabbing in the dark, trying to learn as much as you can and hoping what you've studied is relevant. So yeah, that was a major source of stress. And when I was revising, you'd be studying, I'd try to get through all the content once, then maybe cycle around it again, but by the time I'd come around to start the second cycle, I'd almost forgotten everything from the first pass which I went through. I know the answer to that is spaced repetition, but then it just takes forever and ever to get, and it really just raises the anxiety. Are you going to finish in time? For some reason, I was just really hung up about trying to go for a first class, and for a first class you really have to know your stuff really well, and also try read a little bit around a subject and get things which aren't in the lectures, which is quite a challenge. And I mean, it was in my New Year's resolutions, one of them I wanted to get a first, and maybe it's kind of a sense of wanting to try prove myself, which I guess is not that helpful because, a score doesn't define us, but somehow I was always getting this imposter syndrome. The reason why I say this is like, I'd always ranked well at school, but it was very untested. Like, I had no idea where I stood in the year in Cambridge, whereas was I even top half? Was I like bottom 10%? Like, I just really didn't know, and I was frankly quite curious just to find out. Like, so I wanted to give it my all. Oh, and another bias is when I used to play chess competitively, but like 90% of the best chess players in the country were from London. And like, they even used to have this match, like, I tell all my friends, London versus rest of England. And London would win. It is absolutely, like, they're insanely strong. So I always skewed myself, and I was just wondering, is that the same for like academia? Am I just, because I live almost 200 miles away from London, does that just mean I'm just not as smart as them? And I know this sounds ridiculous, but you know, those schools are genuinely a lot more competitive. So I was just wondering, you know, can I compete with them, or will I always be lower ranked? It was all online second year. Although we got to go back in for first term, we only had like 2 or 3 supervisions in person for the whole year, and only 2 dissections just to look at some head and neck specimens. One thing which I will add, which probably compounded the stress, and this is probably one of the major things, is our supervision times were really unpredictable. So supervisions, as some of you will know, are small group teachings, and this is arranged by your college. The problem is that most of our supervisors were like junior doctors or working in labs or something, so they had really busy day jobs, and basically them teaching us was more of a side thing for them. So often, you know, we had to have classes. There was one class one day which went over 10 p.m. we were having class, and even on Sundays, which is supposed to be the day of rest for Christians at least. We had Sundays, we had 2 classes on Sundays. And because of this whole COVID thing, with everything being online, and basically there wasn't much pressure to finish all of them during term time. So we ended up having loads during the holidays, and it just extended right through the holidays, which meant you couldn't really properly detach from the thing. You always had to constantly check your email to make sure that there wasn't any last minute supervision being arranged. So yeah, that was something that really annoyed me. Although we did go back to Cambridge, it was like incredibly lonely. Yeah, it was frustrating that there's so many people just like next door, like in like 30 seconds walk away, but you couldn't see them. Personally for me, I didn't want to risk breaking the rules because, well, yeah, the infection rate was quite high, and also medics, we were sent quite a strong worded email saying if we were found breaking the rules, we'd be kicked off the course, because I guess medics or prospective medics are supposed to be held to higher standards. So yeah, I didn't want to risk anything. And basically, yeah, first term was just such a drag. It just felt like I was working all day, every day. It kind of got to a point about like midway through first term where I think I had the closest thing to maybe a breakdown, or just, there was just like 2 days where I was just really unsatisfied or just really unhappy for some reason. I didn't tell my parents, because even though I called them every day, because I didn't want them to get worried or start freaking out back at home. This was right before lockdown 2.0 was just announced. But yeah, it was just amazing how my church friends rallied around me. So just that, I remember that Bible study I had on one of those days with one of my good friends, Josh. It was just so refreshing. I really believe that God puts the right people in the right place at the right time for me. Just for some reason, I spontaneously met up with a couple of my friends, and we went for a walk in the botanical gardens in Cambridge, and it's just beautiful. And then even the student team at church sent us like cakes and cards and said they were praying for us just before the lockdown started. And then we also got to go to church in person, which was really good that weekend. And it just reminded me that, you know, God is looking after us, and, you know, it taught me a lot that weekend about need for friends and being around people who are going to support you in a godly way. So yeah, I guess that brings us on to lockdown 2.0 itself, which was pretty much the whole of November. Yeah, lockdown wasn't too bad. Somehow the restrictions, but you're still able to meet one person outdoors for exercise. That kind of worked in my favor, and I managed to organize some runs with some good friends. And maybe I got more used to work, I'm not sure. And then Christmas holidays was like, again, back to the grind, and I was just working all the time, and it was just really hard. Like, you'd say, oh, I'm going to finish all the content by this date, and then it just got pushed back and back and back. You just get that feeling that you've never done enough. So even when I got to the end of the day, and I've actually done quite a lot of work, it still feels like you're working too slow. And I remember even on Christmas Day, I did like 700 Anki cards, but even that felt just not enough. And the reason why I was working so hard is because for some reason our college was obsessed with mock exams. They wanted us to do mock exams every term. pretty much that holiday you just could not relax because you always had these exams looming, which are just going to test all the content, aren't they? So it's really hard to fudge your way around that. And at least my philosophy with mocks is I want to treat it like a real exam, so it gives the best representation of where my understanding is at. So any mistakes I know were genuine and not that just I didn't revise it. So yeah, although I did well in the mocks again, by the time we came to start term 2, I was already like really tired, but term 2, at least for second year, is when you get barraged with the most content and you get an exam at the end of term, which is, yeah, quite a lot on your plate. Term 2 we're actually at home. So by that time lockdown 3 had come because I think back then it was the Alpha variant or the Kent variant that was sending infection rates through the roof. So we couldn't go back to university, and somehow that worked in our advantage because there's just so much content being thrown at you. Just not having to cook for yourself, not having to wash your clothes, it's kind of useful to stay at home and have all these things done for you. And yeah, term 2 it's just more like term 1, many long days. Sometimes I'd only finish lectures maybe at like 10 or 10:30 at night. And this is because, okay, to be fair, I was spending a long time in lectures because I was trying to read the handout at the same time, so I'd keep pausing the lecture and go along the handout and check I understood everything. Then I'd also make active recall questions. So it took like double the time to get through each lecture. And then I was also trying to revise each lecture, like the lecture before starting the next one, but that didn't do anything. Like, it just slipped out the memory because I didn't have time to go back to it like a week later and study it again. The one thing is we were a bit lucky with essays. So first year we pretty consistently had 3 essays a week, 1 for each subject for all the 8 weeks. So we were doing like over 20 essays a term. But for some reason, because a lot of our supervisors were very busy themselves, I guess they didn't want to be marking loads of essays. So in that way, we had more time just to spend actually learning the content rather than frantically trying to put together an essay each week for each subject. So that kind of worked in our advantage. Another thing about term 2 is being at home, you lose out on that camaraderie. So I guess when you're all there, even though everyone's stressed, you kind of go through it as a team and you're like, the collective is suffering and like you have more of those spontaneous moments. But yeah, there's just none of that at home. And the problem is your mind starts assuming that everyone else has it under control and it's only you who's finding it tough, which I know is not true, but like mind plays weird tricks on you. So another good thing was the content was fairly interesting. So you learn about quite a lot of cool stuff like psychology or like motor systems. I don't know why I'm going for all neuro, like cancer drugs, like cardiovascular, like quite a lot of interesting stuff if you're a medical student. So sometimes it's quite enjoyable to do all the studying. And then I guess we need to talk about the head and neck exam. The head and neck exam, it's only like worth 8% of our grade, but for some reason, because it's like our first exam of the year, there's that tendency to burn the bridges and just over prepare. So I did like 30 practice essays. We had these like mini essays, like 15-minute essays, and I pretty much did every single one which had been set in the past 5 years. But the exam itself, well, is an utter flop. Basically, I was already running like 2 minutes behind schedule and you have to work at pretty fast pace. And then I started planning my next one and I was planning for like 3-4 minutes. And then I realized I'd misread the question completely. If I kept carrying on, I would have got 0. So I had to basically start again. And by that time I was like 6-7 minutes behind schedule. And yeah, it didn't really end well. Like I made some factor errors. So that was like a massive blow to the confidence because I thought I was really prepared for that exam, but it just didn't go to plan. I was just worried that this would happen for the bigger subjects as well. So then I guess we come to Easter holidays, where after that kind of H&A blow, so H&A stands for head and neck anatomy, I decided to like redouble my efforts and pretty much go like all guns blazing, like with the revision. So yeah, Easter holidays, it was like the Christmas holidays, but arguably just worse because there was like term 1 content and term 2 content to learn. I probably made a mistake by not taking more days off, but it really did feel that if I took a day off, that I just wouldn't finish. Like, it was that kind of like touch and go situation. My main strategy was actually learning everything on Anki, and I was using loads of decks of cards with all the content from second year, which one of my church friends kind of gave me. And the problem is, it was a bit of a two-edged sword, and it worked beautifully in first year, in that in first year and for first term of second year, there was a manageable number of cards, so I could just about finish and also have time to do like past questions and also some essay practice. But the problem is, like, when there was 2 terms worth of cards, it was just flashcard overload. And I was basically, even though I was learning the things well, I was just going like so slowly through the content that I wouldn't have finished if I kept using Anki. And yeah, this is something like I want to push back a bit on Ali Abdallah and other people. They talk about how like active recall speeds up the learning process, so you have more time to do things which matter to you, like hanging out with friends. But like, I think that's a bit of a myth. Like, active recall, the reason why you learn things better is that it's hard and it does take longer. This is definitely part of the two-edged sword, and it's basically just making me slip further and further behind. And again, they wanted us to do mocks before the start of term 3, which is, again, added a lot of stress. So by the start of term 3, I was very hesitant whether I could actually cover everything in time. And the situation at this point was getting quite desperate. I remember I was putting the hours in, but I simply was not working fast enough. Like, I'd look at the computer clock and just watch the minutes and hours tick by, and I was just like, oh, why am I going fast enough? That led to two things. Firstly, I changed revision strategy. So I stopped using Anki and I was just used these active recall questions on some Word document which I made. That helped me to go a bit quicker, but at the cost was I wasn't learning it as well. So that was one thing. And then the second thing, I made the difficult decision to stay at home for term 3 at well. And I knew I would be letting some people down, mainly from like the church group or like the Christian Union. But at this point, and knowing how hard like first term was, I decided I need like all the support I could get, and I thought the best place I could get that was at home. That was quite a difficult decision, but I think in the end it was the right one. It definitely helped me just have that bit extra breathing room just by not having to look after myself, which is handy. Something major also happened in third term, in that I decided to collaborate extensively with someone and we started sharing a lot of essay plans. This essentially halved my workload, because one way that we tackled the essay papers is that we used to predict what questions would come up based on like the past papers, and we used to create like, let's say 20 essay plans for each subject and then try and memorize these plans. So basically, if that question came up, we could just like regurgitate the plan and hopefully get a good mark. The thing is, this was the most time consuming part, even more time consuming than the Anki. I basically wouldn't have finished if my friend hadn't reached out in the first place and decided to share plans with me, because she actually made the first move. I think that's a good life lesson, like, if you give, then you get. And I also made the decision to share my essay plans with some other friends, and it just helped that cooperativity. I guess maybe one way we could root that biblically is when Jesus teaches in various Gospels, he tells to give without expecting anything in return. With some people, we didn't work as collaboratively, I just gave the essay plans, but who knows, maybe in a couple of years down the line, I'll be on the receiving end of their generosity. And then it progressively got like more and more the day took up studying, like whatever relaxation I had, that was just going as we got closer to exams. And I remember like the weekend before the neuroscience exam in particular, and it just sticks out a lot because I remember pushing myself near to exhaustion. So like, I remember I'd wake up, I'd do my Bible and prayer thing within an hour, then I'd just work until lunch, and then straight after lunch come back, work until my afternoon run. Then I remember I spent like 10 minutes on my phone after the run, but then like shower, and then like work up to like 10:30 p.m. Sleep, rinse and repeat. Yeah, that was kind of scary because I could feel myself, something was wrong in the body, but yeah, I just decided to push through, whether that was rightly or wrongly. So I wouldn't recommend this, because if I had woken up feeling groggy, if I hadn't got a good night's sleep, my exam performance could have been really curtailed, because at that point I was really just running on adrenaline. There's this interesting graph that they showed us in one of the lectures about like how stress impacts performance and how some stress definitely is helpful. I mean, if there wasn't any stress, you have no motivation to get out of bed, but at this point I was really probably running more on like the fear of failure side things, or like just like raw adrenaline keeping me going. And yeah, I guess this comes to the exam periods and how the exams went. I thought they went well. Like, there were some tough papers, but I feel that I'd done all I possibly could to prepare, and yeah, there were no major catastrophes, so that was the main thing for me, and I was very happy just to get to the end of it. And then, obviously, some of you might know if you've watched my reaction to the results video that they did work out favourably in the end for me, and I outlined the reasons in that video why I thought they worked out. So yeah, that kind of wraps up the whirlwind year that was year 2. I thought I might just go through some of like the mechanisms I did to cope with this kind of chronic stress, because it really didn't relent once we started the year until right to the final exam. Like, I only took like a handful of days, you could count it on one hand maybe, off through the whole year, which is definitely not healthy, but there were some like daily things which helped me going, which I thought I'd share with you. I basically categorize these as my non-negotiables. So these are some things which I do consistently every day without fail. And just kind of consistency in them helped me to get that minimum rest which I needed just to keep going. So one thing was to always get 8 hours of sleep, no matter how much work I felt I had to do. Like once it hits that kind of like 10:30 mark, I have to start working, because otherwise, anyway, by then the quality just goes downhill. Another thing was doing daily exercise, and I mean, even though I got shin splints in term 2, as I said, I made sure to do cycling whenever I could. I even like try to physically de-stress when cycling by like going to like the woods or something and just like screaming or shouting or something, just to like try to purge the stress like that. It was quite funny. And then I also tried to have a good diet, very stable, not skipping any meals, not binging or anything, but just eating how much I needed just to keep that sustained level of focus and the blood sugar as constant as possible. Another thing, a non-negotiable, was just the Bible and prayer, even if it was getting shorter and shorter during the exam term. But just having that quiet time in the morning really set me up and helped me maintain that, I like to call an eternal perspective. So even though like the exams, like it feels really stressful, it's like, and it feels like your performance in them will change so much, like in the grand scheme of things, they're not. Even if you failed, you just retake them. You know, God has a much bigger plan for you, which we don't even know at the moment. And Jesus doesn't really care. I mean, Jesus wants us to try hard, but ultimately he loves us because he just loves us. He came to this world to die to save us from our sins. Yeah, just remembering that sometimes really got me through times which I was really catastrophizing the situation in my mind. That, no, just all of this in the end doesn't matter. As long as I just put in the effort, God will take care of the rest in whatever way that he sees fit. So another thing that really helped was having a very supportive family around me when I was staying at home for terms 2 and 3. I think this is maybe one of the biggest reasons which I didn't go to Cambridge, because I knew if I went back that I'd be surrounded by loads of other stressed out people. But here, everyone was just chilled, going on with their daily lives. And I'm very blessed to have a very stable household. And then I had a couple of church friends who were really good and just keep checking in on me, making sure, you know, I wasn't going insane while I was at home. Also making sure that I wasn't feeling left out, because most of the people from church and CU went back to Cambridge for term 3, but I didn't. So yeah, a huge thanks to like Lydia and Josh if you're watching, because sometimes we message like every day just to like check up on each other. And then some like mindset things which I had is like learning to lean into the stress, which is a bit paradoxical, but sometimes I think it's kind of fun to work hard, or even just like make fun of how hopelessly behind you were. It was just a mindset thing which just kind of helped me going. And there's even this book which I listened to on Audible called Relentless. Yeah, it's a bit of a dodgy book. It has a bit of a dodgy narrative. Like, it definitely wouldn't fit certain personalities, but it kind of personified what I was trying to do. Like, be a bit more of a machine and just take emotion out of the equation and just try to get through it. Was it all worth it? And I think it was. I know it was unhealthy at the time, but I knew I'd have a long summer to look forward to afterwards. I kept the summer deliberately empty because I was just feeling quite burnt out, so I just wanted to take several months off. And yeah, I'm extremely happy with the results. The ranking also surprised me. And I think just doing my all and just giving it my all and doing well, that helped get rid of that imposter syndrome. So I feel like now I don't have to prove myself to anyone, and I feel that I belong at Cambridge more now. So yeah, hopefully next year, third year's apparently supposed to be the easier year compared to first and second year. We can get some better work-life balance, but I don't really want to compromise my academic potential. So yeah, even though I got good results, I'm still constantly looking for ways to improve my study method and productivity, so I have like more time to spend on both like relaxing and also hanging out with other people, as well as studying. And yeah, I definitely want to be investing more into church friends and wanting to invest more in relationships, because yeah, this is third year's kind of the final year when like all our year will be there, and then for the next 3 years it's just like us medics who are left behind and like some other courses who are for 4 years. So that brings us to the end of this video. If you made it this far, thank you, it means a lot to me. Even though it's fairly ranty, I hope there was some value for you, or at least you got the honest story out of me. Because yeah, I am conscious that social media can be a place of just reading off life successes, but yeah, hopefully you got the full story here. So anyway, take care and bye for now.